Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, April 14th, 2015, getting into the week here. A lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. 877-300-7645. Trevor is in our control room today, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Now, the big news right now coming out of Washington, D.C. is there seems to be some kind of a deal being arrived at between the Congress and the White House. And apparently Congress is moving forward with a bill that will allow them to review this Iran deal, which means kill it. And they're dropping hints that Obama is backing off his threat to veto it. And I think reading between the lines, Congress has come up with a veto-proof majority, and Obama does not want to go down in the history books having one of his vetoes overturned by the Congress, because that's considered a real black mark on any president's reputation here. And they're talking about token changes to the deal. Reducing the time the Senate has to consider lifting of sanctions from 60 days to 52. And the one positive aspect in this deal is the demands are related exclusively to Iran's nuclear program and not expanding anywhere else in terms of conventional weapons or economic policies or recognition of the State of Israel. But overall, it looks like Congress has successfully challenged the authority of the White House. I still think most of them are guilty of violating the Logan Act. But this is politics. And we're seeing all these stories about, you know, how Obama was trying to sell the Iran deal to Congress, but Congress isn't listening to Obama. He's a lame duck president. He's not going to run again. And there are members of Congress that are listening to AIPAC. They're listening to Netanyahu. But people aren't listening to him quite as much as they did before. As you know, Russia has gone ahead with a long-delayed sale of S-300 missiles to Iran, which are due to start being delivered now and staged deliveries through the end of the year. Now, it has been confirmed that because Russia has stopped manufacturing the S-300, Russia will deliver the S-400 at the S-300 price. So Iran's getting a sweet deal out of this whole situation. Netanyahu is screaming, you know, that this deal undermines Middle East. He's jumping up and down. And basically what's going on here is Netanyahu is seriously ticked off that he won't be able to attack Iran with impunity once those missiles are deployed, which may tempt Netanyahu to strike at Iran's power stations sooner rather than later. But once those missiles are deployed, it is going to be extraordinarily difficult for either the United States or Israel to invade Iran's airspace. Now, Putin, ever the statesman, gave Netanyahu the courtesy of a phone call to say, here's the logic behind all of this. The S-300, S-400, is an aerial defense system. These are not weapons that can be used for offense. They are purely defensive to stop people flying into your country and doing bad things. And this is going to reduce the possibility of war in the Middle East. And, of course, war in the Middle East is what Israel and the U.S. are actually after, which is why they're throwing tantrums on that. Meanwhile, the U.S. chief negotiator in this whole deal is saying the reality is a military operation against Iran will not stop its nuclear program, because you can blow up the facilities and scatter radiation all over the Middle East, but you're not going to be able to bomb their know-how, their expertise. Of course, a lot of these Iranian nuclear scientists have died under suspicious circumstances in the last couple of years, which all seem to go back to assassinations. But a military strike isn't the solution to the problem of Iran having nuclear power. And, of course, the problem never was Iran having nuclear power. Israel wants to get rid of a regional rival. The U.S. wants Iran's oil to be traded only for the U.S. dollar. The private central bankers want Iran to allow a private central bank. And that's what's really going on here, trying to keep this thing ramped up. Oh, those gosh darn bad Iranians. By the way, somebody pointed out, all of the talking head shows on the corporate media have all these experts about how bad and evil Iran is. Have you noticed they never have anybody from Iran acting as a spokesman for the other side? So much for fair and balanced. It's all propaganda. They're not even going to allow the possibility of somebody coming in and saying, hey, Iran has not launched a war of aggression against another country in over 200 years. Don't want those American people thinking about that. We want the American people hating Muslims, and we want the American people out there ready to throw their babies onto the Iranians' bayonets here. Now, Netanyahu is once again grandstanding out there saying that Iran must end aggression before sanctions can be lifted. Now, Iran isn't the aggressor in the region. Israel is. Just look at the maps. Look at the history of the wars. But Netanyahu is still trying to find some way to kill this deal, even though Israel is not part of the P5+1. Netanyahu is working through his proxies in the United States Congress, trying to kill this deal. But it's rather interesting in that even though the U.S. Congress is bought and remains bought by AIPAC and Israel, the rest of the world is kind of cooling on this whole situation. There was a very interesting article in Axis of Logic saying that Netanyahu's biggest worry right now is that people are ignoring him. Because he's the Israeli who cried nuclear wolf too many times, or nuclear duck in his case. And people just aren't picking up. They're not paying attention anymore. He's out there screaming nuclear bomb. Israel has been screaming that Iran is within weeks of a nuclear bomb since the 1980s. And after all these years of dire warnings and predictions, it hasn't happened. And nobody has any evidence that it's happened. And all the evidence presented to us turned out to be fake. And there's something you need to remember about phony evidence. Let's take the laptop of death. Somebody got a laptop, they put a bunch of made-up documents about nuclear weapons on it, which real nuclear weapons experts said were junk. They were garbage. Whoever put these documents together doesn't really know what they're talking about. And this laptop of death was propaganda laundered through MEK and presented to the world as proof that Iran was building nuclear weapons. Now then, if you have real evidence of something going on, you never, ever, ever include faked evidence. Because if it's discovered, it discredits everything. And so when you see a country like Israel making up fake evidence against Iran, it basically tells you Israel has no real evidence against them. That's why they're making it up. Now, another story over in Middle East Monitor talking about how Israel is now taking active steps to cover up its alliance and support of Al-Qaeda in Syria. Remember Al-Qaeda? They were supposed to be the bad guys, and now they're Israel's best friend. And they don't want any news about it. Israel has started locking up the people who videotaped IDF and Al-Qaeda shaking hands and sharing ammunition and supplies on that Syrian border. Meanwhile, we're seeing international aid agencies are out there with a really interesting suggestion. They're saying it's time for sanctions on Israel over the Gaza stalemate, because occupation is not supposed to be permanent. And the Palestinians do have a right to self-determination as enumerated in the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And these aid agencies are saying, if you can sanction Iran over non-existent nuclear weapons, if you can sanction Russia over a non-existent invasion of Ukraine, it's time to sanction Israel over the very real war crimes they are committing against the people of Gaza. And they're absolutely right. They're absolutely right. All right, we're coming up here on our first commercial break. We're going to be back to our show after these few words. Oh, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here, and I am I'm watching the Fox News feed, and apparently the director of the Immigration Customs Enforcement Department, Bureau, whatever it is under severe criticism because apparently a couple of hundred illegal immigrants with murder convictions have been released into the general population of the United States of America. This in the same country where a guy just got shot 8 times in the back over a traffic violation. Those illegal immigrants are getting much better treatment at the hands of the U.S. government than us natural-born U.S. citizens. seems a little weird. Now, getting on back to what's going on in Israel, somebody just sent me an article. This is in the German media, is not being mentioned in the American media for reasons that will be very obvious. I had to run it through Google Translate, but basically what it says is going back to the 1960s, Germany was giving Israel funds that were used to build that complex in Dimona, with presumably financed that hidden bomb factory underneath. Now, this is a growing scandal because that recently declassified U.S. document confirms that the U.S. government knows Israel is a nuclear power and has been since the 1970s. The U.S. government was helping Israel build hydrogen bombs, and they lied to all of us when they claimed otherwise. We don't know. Remember that shameful display by Obama towards Helen Thomas at his first press conference as president? And she just said, what nations in the Middle East have nuclear weapons right now? And Obama just danced away from it, and the next day Helen Thomas was gone. And now we know that, yes, Obama knew. At that point, the question was asked, Israel has nuclear weapons. And now we're finding out that Germany, the German taxpayers, helped fund the construction of that bomb factory. We also have those documents that surfaced during the change of government in South Africa showing Israel has so many nuclear weapons they were trying to sell some of the leftovers, which is the activity the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty is supposed to prevent, which is why Israel won't sign it, nor will they allow IAEA inspections. But Israel's on the forefront of out there screaming that Iran's nuclear program has to be shut down, even though everything Iran is doing is allowed to Iran under the terms of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which Iran has signed and ratified, and so has the United States. Iran is playing by the rules. Israel and the U.S. are not. Another story coming out of the Telegraph in Great Britain, also not being reported here in the American media. Human Rights Watch is saying that the Israeli settlements are using Palestinian child labor as young as 11 to work on their farms, often in dangerous conditions and for very, very low wages. Now, earlier today, the United Nations Security Council imposed an arms embargo on the Houthis in Yemen and on the Allied forces loyal to deposed President Saleh. Now, this doesn't sound like a really practical situation because they're basically taking weapons away from the people trying to defend their country from the Saudi invasion. But I'm sure that the U.S. ambassador told the Security Council, we will veto anything that limits our ability to go in and slap up those Yemeni people and teach them a lesson for trying to get rid of their U.S. puppet. And the attacks are continuing, and despite the cuts to communications infrastructure, word is getting out. Apparently, Saudi warplanes bombed a populated Marib area and killed dozens of school children. Just blew them up. This is not an attack by military against military. This is punishing the people of a country for daring to try and kick out their U.S. puppet ruler. That's what's going on. It's going on in Iraq. It's going on in Libya. Now it's going on in Yemen. The empire is crumbling, and the empire is trying to maintain control over its conquered provinces. Now, as one of the callers to the show yesterday mentioned, there is a new region in Ukraine that is declaring itself an independent republic. They're breaking away from Kiev, and they are joining Donetsk and Luhansk. And this is in the region of Odessa, where some of the worst atrocities of the U.S.-sponsored coup d'etat took place. Now, as you heard on the SRN news break, there is active fighting in the Donbass, and it is a huge mess. The OSCE is reporting dozens of violations of the ceasefire by the forces in Kiev. Kiev is saying the eastern Ukrainian republics are shooting at us. Well, they're trying to defend themselves Kiev tried to send in a tank attack to recapture the Donetsk airport. But the OSCE is reporting that the number of clashes in the Donbass is rising sharply, and it's all being initiated by Kiev. Kiev has responded by trying to shell the OSCE observers and journalists, which is not going to win them any friends here. Now, interestingly enough, with the eastern Ukrainian republics now basically out of reach of Kiev, the Donetsk officials and Malaysian officials are going to do something the so-called international, headed by the Dutch, investigation to Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 have never done. They're going to visit the crash site this week, and they're going to find their own evidence as to what happened. They're going to be there for 2 or 3 weeks. They're looking for witnesses. They're looking for physical evidence. And I would not be surprised to see Kiev deliberately try and bomb that area to obliterate anything that might remain. Meanwhile, Poroshenko has fired Ukraine's ambassador to the United States, Alexander Motsyk. He'll be replaced with Valery Chely, a senior foreign policy official at the Poroshenko administration. So apparently Poroshenko is not happy with the support or lack thereof he is getting from the United States. Now, we mentioned this earlier, but in Time Magazine's 2015 reader poll, where they let the readers vote for who they think ought to be Man of the Year, Vladimir Putin won by a landslide, which I'm sure is going to be grating on Obama's nerves. And it doesn't mean he will be Time Magazine's Man of the Year, because in recent years, the people will vote one way, and Time just goes off and does something else. And I'm sure there's already been a phone call from the White House to Time Magazine's editorial department saying, don't you dare put Putin on the cover, or bad things will happen to you. All right, we've got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I just got an email update on that story about how Germany was giving Israel the money to build that Dimona facility, including its secret bomb factory. And according to this update I just got, Israel was blackmailing Germany's government, threatening Adenauer that they would identify members of the current post-World War II German government who had been Nazis, make the names public. And that's how Israel coerced Germany into funding their building of the bomb factory. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call here. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Do as I say, not as I do. It's funny how Israel can get all these weapons and money from America. You don't hear nothing from Iran, but when Iran gets a defensive missile system, it's like everybody gets up in arms about it, you know?
Well, it's even worse than that. I mean, if the president wants to go to war and murder people extrajudicially, Congress doesn't want to be bothered. Yeah, sure, go ahead. When the president starts talking peace, then Congress stands up and says, we demand oversight. How dare you talk about peace without our permission?
And Putin even called Netanyahu and told him. I wonder if he told him before or after. Probably after, I would.
Oh, yeah, I mean, Putin doesn't need Israel's permission to do anything, unlike the U.S. government. And, I'm sure the U.S. government is over there in Tel Aviv right now saying, do we have your permission to say that we're not really under your control?
Now, they got a base in Tartus in Syria, so they can actually have the S-400, or it's S-300 version 4, which is replaced by the S-400. But, they already probably have them at the base in Tartus. So they could just go hop, skip, and a jump right to Iran.
Possibly, but again, my understanding is Russia has stopped actually manufacturing the S-300, and that's why Putin is going to give Iran a free upgrade to the S-400.
That's a pretty good upgrade.
That's a very good upgrade. And go ahead.
No, go ahead. I just wanted to comment on that Walmart, so you can finish up on your talking points.
Okay.
Now, with the Walmart, the 6 stores closing because of plumbing problems, I think this is a sneaky way of closing the stores because of the economy.
Could very well be. I mean, all of these retail outfits are trying to still project the image that they're successful. This is where people are going to get the deals. And if Walmarts are starting to close, that basically says that, even the poorest segment of the economy is in serious trouble. Of course, they were always in trouble, but it tells us something I've been saying all along. all of the economic policy choices we have seen by corporations and the government over the last several years are all based on the assumption that there is still plenty of wealth out here in the hinterland. They just have to figure a way to take it away from us. Carbon taxes, Obamacare, you know, the blue light special or whatever else it is. And all of their policies fail when you come to the realization that the American people just don't have any money left. They're living paycheck to paycheck. They're just barely making the payments on their utility bills and their rent and the gas and the food. They don't have anything left over. With the advent of Obamacare, we're hearing from doctors and hospitals that their business has actually declined because people can't afford those deductibles. And they are choosing to avoid going to the doctor and the hospital, except in cases of extreme emergency, because they just don't have the money. And it's another sign of this impending collapse. And the problem, again, goes back to a simple reality of running a pyramid scheme. You know, you can take all the money out of the top that you want, but there has to be some mechanism to recycle that wealth back down to the bottom so that workers can transform their labor into money to pour back into the bottom of the pyramid. And if that system collapses and nobody replaces it, the whole system is doomed. We've seen high-paying jobs offshored to other countries. We have seen our educational system go from education to indoctrination to the state where American workers just don't have the skill levels to work in a technological marketplace, which is why American companies are having to bring in all these H-1B visa workers from other countries who actually have a decent education to be able to fulfill these tasks. And
the government don't care. Look at Walmart. They gave people 5 hours notice telling them they're closing the store. They don't care.
Yeah, well, you know, the reason for the short notice is to limit the amount of pilfering that's going to go on here. And I went through that myself years ago. I was after I left Final Fantasy, I briefly worked for a company called the Ohana Learning Foundation, which had all kinds of problems I don't need to go into. But on the day they closed down, we went into work like normal, and our first clue was the email system wasn't working any longer. And they called us all together, and we were told, you know, we're shutting the office. You've got 1 hour to clean out your desks and get out. And they had security guards there to make sure we weren't stealing things.
It's just sad. You got NAFTA with Bill Clinton. You got CAFTA with George W. Bush, and people still just don't get it. You've been sold out. You've been had. People, wake up.
Well, the people who are not getting the clue are those at the top who are totally focused on taking wealth out of the system and don't understand that unless workers are able to generate new wealth through their labor to feed into the bottom of the system has to collapse. And they're oblivious to that. They're totally oblivious.
It's funny, we know that. You know, if you don't give people money to purchase your products, then obviously you're not going to be able to sell them. I mean, it's any dummy, you know, I mean, figure that out. I don't know why these people can't.
Well, you know, it started very slow where there were only a few companies that were offshoring their manufacturing and their profitability went up. So everybody said, yeah, I'm going to do that as well. And they lost track of the fact that their customers are also their employees. And my customers are your employees and your customers are my employees. And if we all send the jobs elsewhere, nobody has any money. We're hearing all this screeching coming from Wall Street about the problem with the economy is the American people aren't spending enough. We don't have it to spend. The whole purpose of private central banking is to loot all the wealth of the nation and put it in the pockets of the bankers, and nobody had a plan for what happened when they succeeded. And all the wealth is concentrated at the very, very, very top, and there's not enough left in circulation to power this economy. And until they're willing to deal with that and acknowledge that reality, this economy is doomed. And that's why they're trying to get a world war going as a distraction before it all falls apart.
All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot for the phone call. Now, getting on back to the stink face with Russia. And by the way, that anti-Russian coalition in Europe is really starting to fray around the edges. They're all getting sick and tired of the harm from the economic sanctions, and nobody in Europe wants a new world war on their front lawn because they've already been through that twice. Now, Great Britain is making a big stink about the fact that Russia is out there in the North Atlantic with military drills, war games. And, of course, Russia has every right to be there. It's international waters. They're not intruding into British territorial airspace or oceans. Meanwhile, under the terms of a European treaty that was signed before the U.S. decided they needed to go to war against ruble, Great Britain is required to allow Russian observers to watch the NATO war games. And they're not happy about that. So, Russia has started supplying grains, equipment, and construction material to Iran in exchange for crude oil. It's a barter deal, which means it doesn't go through anybody's electronic financial system where it can be tinkered with or blocked. It's estimated to be worth $20 billion in direct barter trade. Nothing wrong with that. And basically, Moscow is saying we're going to give Iran a head start to rebuild their economy after, following the lifting of sanctions, which I got to be honest, looking at the Congress, it's not going to happen. Netanyahu is going to order the U.S. Congress to block the lifting of sanctions. Congress will obey, and there's not really much of anything Obama can do about that. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, Syria's President Bashar al-Assad has basically come out calling this story that the U.S. is fighting ISIS in Syria total nonsense. And he points out the only real progress against ISIS is from the Syrian army. And the United States and their allies continue to pour money and support into the hired mercenary forces trying to oust Assad. And the airstrikes keep targeting Syrian economic infrastructure, pipelines, refineries, storage yards, that kind of situation. ISIS is another made-up enemy that they will plop down into any country they need to invade. Which means they may be getting ready to invade Mexico, because there's a story we're going to be covering a little later in the show. ISIS has training bases in Mexico. Ooh. Alrighty, let's see. We are going to grab a phone call. Deborah in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, I just wanted to know.
Yes.
I saw the video and I was just frustrated with it. He's frustrated. And this has been happening all over the country.
Okay, which video? Which video? I know you know what you're talking about. I'm not sure what you're talking about. The listeners aren't sure what you're talking about. Which video?
I'm talking about the man with the eat, sleep, angry grandpa on his T-shirt.
Okay.
And then I looked on my Facebook page and it says mad as hell about what, Scott? About what, Walter Scott?
Okay. And your point is?
He's saying that the guy that got shot in the back several times or whatnot, and he's angry because he's also afraid, and this is a white guy saying this.
Well, there was a study done in Washington State that showed that because of the backlash in Ferguson and Eric Garner and Trayvon Martin, American police actually do hesitate before pulling the trigger on black suspects, and they're 25 times more likely to shoot a white suspect than a black suspect right now. So this really is not a racial issue anyway. It is an issue of unbridled, uncontrolled police brutality.
Racial issue. I'm not trying to call it a racial issue, but what I am saying is that the statistics right now are showing that there have been so many black men and or women shot down by the police.
And whites.
It's unnecessary.
And white people are being shot down by the police. You are 55 times more likely to be wrongfully murdered by a police officer than by a terrorist in the United States. And the number of victims crosses all color, all ethnic groups, all genders.
Yes, and it's also more likely that black people also kill themselves.
Well, that, I think, is a separate, unrelated issue, and it's probably tied in with the economy.
Yeah, it probably is. It probably is. Okay. But what I'm saying is this is an issue that it keeps on coming up.
Well, it's spanned up to give the candidates something to talk about next year that isn't the economy and isn't the wars and isn't foreign policy. And we know that a huge amount of money was funneled into these incidents to turn them into national issues for political gain here. And in fact, we just put up an article here where George Soros literally spent millions of dollars to these organizations that went into Ferguson and kicked up a ruckus in order to make it a national news story. And every election cycle we see the same thing. They'll kick up women's rights. We've got this feminist who's out there saying that men who harass women should be chemically castrated. They're going to be out there, bashing the gays with that whole Indiana thing. And the whole reason for doing that is so all of next year we'll be arguing about gay rights, women's rights, and racism, and not paying attention to the economy and the wars. Every election cycle they play the same dirty trick.
Yes, I understand that, but at the same time, I'm saying that we need to pay more attention to what, and then, everything is all about gun rights, and everybody should be able to have guns and all that. Everybody's shooting everybody.
Well, I think if everybody, now wait a minute, if everybody had guns, there'd be a lot less gun violence because everybody would know if you pull that trigger, somebody's going to pull the trigger in return. One of the biggest bogus myths that Hollywood has constructed is the idea of the wild, wild west, where everybody was wearing guns and everybody's shooting up the town. The reality is that out west, where everybody was wearing guns, was a far less violent place than the eastern centers of commerce. If you've seen the movie Daniel Craig Lewis, The Gangs of New York, that's a very accurate telling of what was going on in the East Coast. The reason the myth of the Wild Wild West was created through those dime novels was propaganda to discourage workers from leaving their jobs in those eastern factories and heading out west to set up a homestead and have a better life. Because these owners of these factories on the East Coast were seeing their labor just go away, and they needed to scare them into staying where they were. And that was the origin of a lot of this mythology about what a dangerous place the Wild West was, and it really wasn't. Do you know why the gunfight at the OK Corral is such an historic event? Because it was so rare, it was uncommon, and that's what made it noteworthy and going into the history books. These days in any major U.S. city, you see gun battles like that. It doesn't even make the evening news.
Okay. Well, I will agree with that.
Okay.
But at the same time, I will also agree. I would also want to make a point that here in Texas, we have had several people come out and say that they need to walk around with their guns in their hands and walk around the streets with 9mm and whatever kind of gun you can think about.
Mm-hmm.
Just walk around the streets like this. Okay?
Okay.
And back in the 60s when
Okay, well, walking around...
Black nationalists, when they did that in Oakland, California, they were basically gunned down.
Well, that was a put-up job as part. That was a put-up job as part of COINTELPRO's effort to increase racial tension in this country. Again, to undermine the civil rights movement, to derail. Martin Luther King was getting ready to tell blacks to evade the draft any way that they could because the blacks were being disproportionately put on those front lines. And it was all about keeping us angry and fighting each other rather than uniting as a single American population and pointing the finger of blame where it really deserves to go, which is Washington, D.C. and Wall Street. Anyway, Deborah, I'm going to let you go. We're coming up here on the top of the hour news break. Thank you very much for your phone call. And, everyone makes this big deal about, they're carrying guns around. Well, I'm giving my age away here. But when I was a kid, it wasn't a big deal to carry a gun around. I used to take a gun to school. So did my other classmates. We'd put it in the cloakroom. And it was accepted because on our way home from school every day, we would walk by the farm fields and we would varmint them. Take shots at the animals and birds that were in there feeding on our food crops. And that was an accepted part of life. We never had a school shooting. Everybody was too well armed, and we didn't have prescription antidepressants back then. There was no such thing as ADHD. We called it teacher is boring me. And I don't have a problem with people carrying guns around. It's what they do with them that's the issue. And right now, we've got a real problem with the police departments overusing their guns against innocent people, or even people suspected of minor crimes. That guy who got shot in the back was originally pulled over for a traffic violation. That shouldn't end with his funeral, and yet it did. And it's not a racial issue, despite all of the political machinations trying to sell it as one. This is an issue of uncontrolled police brutality against every single American citizen, and it has to stop. For one thing, it undermines the credibility and legitimacy of the government to have the police acting like this. We used to hear stories about these kind of abuses about the Gestapo and the SS in Nazi Germany, and now it's right here in front of us. How are we supposed to view our government with this kind of abuse going on? Got to take a break for the news, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And hour number 2, the phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. And before we take our next phone call, quick story finishing up the international news. Turkey has just started construction of their first nuclear power station. And so we're going to start the little egg timer here to find out how long it's going to be before Israel starts screaming about Turkey getting weapons of mass destruction. We have to sanction them. We have to invade and bomb them, because Israel and Turkey have not really been very good relations ever since that Mavi Marmara incident there. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Robert in California. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. How's it going? I just wanted to talk real quick about the police misconduct, the police brutality that we've been seeing a lot on the news. And I think, for the most part, we really don't understand how quickly a situation can escalate until it happens to us. I'd like to share a situation with you really quick, if that's okay.
Yes, certainly.
Okay. So, yeah, I'm in California. My local PD, I had a run-in with them about a year and a half ago. And, you know, I work as a technician. I usually carry a knife on me. You know, it's a pocket knife, but you can see it from the outside. Now, I had a run-in with the police officer. Police officer asked, you know, if he can remove my weapon. Now, I told him that I knew my rights. Hands out. I said, I'll comply, but I don't consent. I don't think he liked the fact that I had told him that I knew my rights. So he comes in very cautiously, grabs my knife. My hands are, you know, extended out towards him. But the second he removes the knife and he flings it, he follows that up with, you know, haymakers. He throws a left hook towards my head. You know, I duck it, and that's it. I mean, he's full on just attacking me. Now, the situation escalated very quickly, and it happened in front of my wife and children. So, you know, they don't know what's going on. My littlest kid, he's only 4 years old. He had no clue. He tried to come in and get the cop to stop assaulting me. Now, I'm kind of turtling up. You know, I know better than to escalate the situation any further. Long story short, in order to protect my son, I had to, it's a maneuver called a sweep. I swept the police officer, and just pinned him to the ground, not using my hands, just using my shoulder. But that was it. And, you know, of course he didn't like that. I ended up getting tased. He started reaching for items on his belt. I could have been killed in front of my wife and children. Luckily, I wasn't. Now, all of this happened with him, just this police officer there. There was no backup or nobody else. Backup arrived about 3 minutes later. Now, when we went to court, and I couldn't afford an attorney. I didn't have the money to afford an attorney, but I got the discovery. And in the police report, it turns out that he had the responding officers corroborate the false story that he had written. And the story that he had written was just absolute. I mean, it's perjury. It was completely fabricated from me charging him to trying to remove the gun from his holster, to striking him multiple times in the face. I mean, and that wasn't the worst of it, okay? Because it turns out that this was an executive officer. He was an executive officer, which means that there were officers under his command in our district. Mm-hmm. So, you know, the fish rots from the head down. And you can see how, my wife was saying this as well, when the responding officers, they showed up afterwards, that whatever he was saying for them to do, that they did it. And immediately after the incident happened, they go off to the side. He's kind of laughing about it, like joking about it. But she overheard him telling them, okay, here's what you're going to say. So when you've got executive officers that are willing to not only fabricate stories that will indict, somebody, in all honesty, right? I mean, what he charged me with was resisting arrest. Resisting arrest should be a secondary charge. There should always be a primary charge, that's causing the initial arrest. But I wasn't under arrest for anything. But they know that's just one of those dubious charges they can throw on you, and unless you got the resources to fight it in court, it's going to stick.
Yeah, we're hearing this story so many times. I mean, in the good old days of To Protect and to Serve, once the officer had removed the knife and you are disarmed, he's supposed to basically say, okay, we're going to just move forward from here, not just tear into you for having had this knife. And we really are in a situation where the police are violating the law left and right. They're covering for each other. They're using throw-down guns. What this whole Walter Scott shooting incident has underscored is that the police will lie about these lethal encounters. The corporate media will just go along with it. And the reason this has become a major scandal is not the shooting of Walter Scott, but the fact that all of these players, police and corporate media, were caught out, flat out lying about what was going on. And, they're saturating the blogs with all these people saying, well, the guy shouldn't have run, he shouldn't have done this, he shouldn't have done that. No, the problem is the police are being trained by Israeli security experts to treat the American people the way the IDF treats the Palestinians. The Palestinians don't like it. There's no reason for the American people to like it. The police are supposed to be working for the community, not acting as our overseers and flogging us when we get out of line.
Right, but here's the worst part about that situation is I think that he understood just how much he had crossed the line, and that's why he had to cover all of his bases. And part of covering his bases was that he charged my wife with obstruction of justice, or not obstruction of justice, but obstructing or delaying an officer, which still falls under resisting arrest. And because my daughter was there, okay, she's a 16-year-old at the time, he charged her with being involved with this as well, because he knew that if I were to somehow win my case, that I'd still have to win against my wife, and I'd still have to win my daughter's case as well. I mean, it was just, all of these charges were trumped up. He was just trying to just ensnare as many people as he could. I mean, and again, he's an executive officer that is willing to throw an entire family under the bus because he was willing to break the law.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. We're in that state of the country where the police got lured across that line with that whole civil forfeiture issue, because in their hearts of hearts, I know some of the people here in the HPD, in their heart of hearts, they know it's wrong, okay? But they got lured across with the promise that there's going to be a lot more money to spend on the department, you're going to get a lot more toys to play with. Remember when John Oliver did his thing about the margarita machine that was bought for a police department out of civil forfeiture proceeds? And once the police compromise themselves on that, it gets very easy to just turn them into this brutalizing presence. But they're in violation of the law. And unfortunately, they do cover for each other. The courts are covering for them, because when you take a police department, a police force, and you turn them into an instrument with which to oppress the people, the first message that goes out is you can do whatever you want and nothing bad will happen to you. And very rarely are police held to account for what they're doing. There are a few cases where courageous people with cameras have caught what's going on, and they make a big stink about it. But it's very obvious at this point, the government is not going to get the police departments under control. It's going to be up to we the people with our legions of cameras. And that's, again, this is why now the police departments want some kind of a device to disable cameras around around what they're doing here. So this is a good time for you to dust off that old pocket point and shoot that doesn't have Wi-Fi or Bluetooth on it, because those can't be disabled remotely the way the cell phone cameras can.
Yeah, and it's not going to surprise you to hear that during the discovery process, there was only a portion of the audio equipment or an audio recording that was working, because apparently during all the majority of the incident that took place, they can't find that recording anywhere. The equipment must have malfunctioned.
Oh, yeah. We've been hearing. Well, we know the cops are actually disabling that equipment. Anyway, listen, I hope it turns out well for you, Robert. I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with more phone calls after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and my goodness, the phone lines are just loaded up. I don't think I've seen this many calls at the same time before, so let's get some of these calls answered, and then we'll get back on to the economic news. James in North Carolina. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Thanks for taking my call. At the risk of getting us all worked up and angry, because it's difficult to talk about the Tsarnaev trial without getting really angry, I did a little bit of background research and it came up with another angle that shows just how much of a railroading of a defendant this is. The so-called defense attorney, Judy Clark, is actually a federal employee. She works for this group called the Federal Defenders of San Diego, which is funded by the federal government. And they've got a long list of high-profile clients that they've managed to get locked up.
The patsies. Their job is to bury the patsies.
Yeah. I don't know if you had gone into that or had found out about that particular aspect of the trial.
Oh yeah, we covered that. I mean, Judy Clark represented the Unabomber, I think, and just a bunch of. She is the go-to girl to preserve the official story in a court of law.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing that really angers me even more is that she comes from my hometown.
Well, I'm not going to hold that against you.
Yeah, well, thank you.
All right.
I appreciate that.
All right, we're going to let you go. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to go to John in Illinois. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, forgive me for not checking your website first. Did you just Australian embarrassment, the defense? Did you see the interview? You didn't know the name of it?
Okay, we've got a really, really bad connection. Is this the guy who's like being hit with all these corruption charges?
I don't know if he is or not. I just know he's the defenseman. Kevin Andrews is his name?
Yes.
Yeah, there was a reporter from, they said ABC 7, I guess it was in a local one, but she just kept drilling him. And she just went Helen Thomas on his ass. Oh, excuse me. Yeah. She just said, before you send, you're personally responsible for sending people, sons and daughters, into a war zone, and you don't even know who you're fighting. And he just kept sidestepping it with all this. It was absolutely embarrassing for them.
Well, good for her.
He's like, I'm not going to go into operations, and he goes, well, there's many layers of leadership that we're fighting, and then she told him who it was. She goes, well, the U.S. has a $10 million bounty on this guy's head, and she named him after. She just ruined him for about 90 seconds. And it was a public embarrassment, and I think I thought it was just great.
Oh,
but,
you gotta send me that URL to the video. I gotta post that one.
It is on RT. It hit their news about 6 hours ago. So if you go to the RT main page, you'll find it. I wasn't able to make a YouTube out of it, but let's find out what happened to that reporter.
Yeah, probably the same thing happened to Helen Thomas. Okay.
Exactly. All right.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go and switch over to Ken in Massachusetts. Aloha, Ken. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Okay. I have two observations. One is that the president said that the Pentagon told him that global warming is a national threat to our national security. I said, does that mean we can shoot bullets at it?
They're going to bomb the global warming. They're going to bomb those polar bears. You know, if at first you don't succeed, drop bombs.
The other thing is the Atlanta court has sentenced some of the teachers 20 years in prison. And I wonder if does that mean that either they're going to bring the yardstick back and the ruler back into schools, or they're going to throw the kids out that aren't learning fast enough?
Well, I think those teachers should have gone to prison, probably not for that long, but ultimately it is the administration and this government program of just wanting to get everybody to score good on tests so it looks like we've got an educated population, when in point of fact we have one that is merely indoctrinated. They're not teaching those kids to think. They're not teaching those kids to be problem solvers, because look how much trouble us existing problem solvers are for the propagandists in this country.
Exactly. All right, thank you. That's all I had to say.
All right, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Mike in Tennessee. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Thank you for taking my call. I want to see what your take is on this. Back in November the 18th, 2014, Neo-Eastern Outlook, William F. Engdahl, I think I pronounced it correctly, BRICS Brazil President next Washington target. Is this why they're having all the big protests down there, and they're targeting Brazil and Argentina because Argentina's been invited to the BRICS?
It could very well be. Yeah, the U.S. is desperate to shut down somehow BRICS, the AIIB, the Shanghai Cooperative Organization, the Central Asian Investment Fund. The U.S. cannot survive in a world where there is competition for the U.S. dollar and the U.S.-centric IMF and SWIFT system. We've let our manufacturing rot away. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture. And so from the U.S. government point of view, they're fighting for their very survival, not realizing that if Washington, D.C. goes away, the rest of us 330 million Americans are going to make out just fine. But that's, yeah, and we're seeing all these destabilizations around the world. They're out there trying to literally bring the world back to Bretton Woods, and the world remembers how badly they got cheated on the last Bretton Woods, and they don't want to do that.
Well, Mike, this is a great article that I think ties right into this, and I think that's the purpose of our foreign policy, is destabilize everybody. Just destabilize, and it's going to backfire. It really is.
It already is here, because every time they destabilize a government and put in a U.S. puppet, the people of that country stand up and try and kick the puppet out, and that's why the U.S. is back in Iraq for the third time, back in Libya for the second time, back in Yemen for the second time. They can't keep control over those populations because those populations understand what the U.S. is doing to them, and they're not willing to go along with it.
And I think, sir, that the reason that Obama went down there is to shore up. I called in last week about this down in that area to you, and I think this is one of the things. This is adding up here. This is moving in this direction. So keep an eye on this, and I do. And I really like your show. I really enjoy your thought and what you do and your show, and just keep up the good work.
I thank you very much for those kind words, and my understanding is that except for the newsworthy meeting with Raul Castro, Obama did not get anything he wanted from the Summit of the Americas. So now we're hearing about all these Latin American countries saying it's time for the U.S. to take their military bases back out. So, yeah, the world is turning against the United States, and it's long overdue. Thank you for the call. We're going to let you go and take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to talk about the economy right now. And as we mentioned yesterday and late last week, the negotiators in Europe on the side of the ECB, the European Union Commission, IMF, World Bank, all of those people who Greece supposedly owes all this money to, were somewhat taken aback that Greece didn't back down from their hardline position. And we had observed that their hardline position is based on the reality that if they cut Greece any slack on the debt, every other member nation of the European Union is going to demand exactly the same thing. So the IMF is out there throwing their hands up in despair and saying, we're giving up. This negotiation is not going anywhere, and Greece is going to default on the next debt repayment. Now, Russia threw them a lifeline to make the payment that was due last week. That was something like 400 million euros. But there's another big payment coming up, over 2 billion with a B. Greece doesn't have it. And remember, to make that last payment, Greece was borrowing, you'll pardon the expression, from pension funds, other social services funds, anywhere they could get money. They emptied the country to make that payment. And now they're basically talking about going back to the drachma, defaulting on all the debt, because Greece is going to be out of euros by the end of this month. And what that means is, when they default, there's going to be a derivatives crisis and a new Lehman Brothers moment. Now, we've been hearing rumblings from Wall Street that they're just not going to bother paying the derivatives because the same institutions that sell those derivatives sit on the committee that decides if a genuine credit default has happened. And so far, their practice has been to say, well, it's not really a default, so we don't have to pay. But there's only so many times they can do that without crashing the derivatives market itself. So they're between a rock and a hard place, especially for a monster derivatives bill that Greece's default is going to trigger. So they're either going to be stuck paying those derivatives, or they're going to see the entire derivatives market collapse. There's really no way out. Now, Standard & Poor's has now cut Ukraine's credit ratings basically to the bone and saying default of Ukraine, meaning Kiev, is virtually inevitable. Now, Ukraine, Kiev, is now rated CCC minus. That's about as bad as you can get. And all those banks that Poroshenko borrowed money from to recapture the East, they're not going to be repaid. They're certainly not going to loan them any more money. There's a huge debt exposure there. Billions upon billions upon billions. But don't worry about those banks. I'm sure they'll get another taxpayer bailout, right? Because that's what always happens. Every time they mess up, turn around to the U.S. government, we need another bailout, and the government will say, those generous American taxpayers, they'll be happy to bail you out one more time. Story coming out of Investment Watch blog, get ready for QE4. We've had 2 lousy quarters. The indicators are we are back in recession, even though the government won't admit it. A trifecta of bearish signals on the market. And a Greek default is probably going to have ripple effects all across all the markets. And here we are looking at the effects of inflation. Food prices up, gas prices are down only because of the oil price war. Costs are going up. They're still trying to pretend that all these trillions that the Federal Reserve created out of thin air is not triggering inflationary pressures in our economy. Partly because most of those trillions got pocketed by the money junkies. Those money junkies are very nobly offering themselves up as cash sinks to prevent the overprinting of money from inflating the value of the currency. How very generous of them to do that. And they're doing very well out of the deal. But for the rest of the country, we have nothing to show for all this quantitative easing. The bailouts, TARP, none of it worked to restart the economy because the economy is so corrupted that all the available wealth is flowing into the pockets of people who already have it. Businesses are shutting down all over the country. It's seizing up because there isn't enough currency in circulation to support commerce, which is the inevitable eventual result of having a privately owned central bank issue all the public currency as a loan at interest. That's what happened in Britain in the 1700s. It's what happened to the American colonies when King George III ordered the colonies to conduct business only with banknotes borrowed at interest from the Bank of England. They know this is what eventually happens. Now, we're hearing that this Friday there's going to be a private little breakfast meeting. This got leaked by Gatta. But they're having this breakfast meeting on Friday. It's sponsored by the Official Monetary and Financial Institutions Forum and the World Gold Forum. And basically it's the central bankers and the heads of the key investment houses getting together to talk about the problems with gold. meaning there isn't enough to cover their outstanding paper obligations by a huge, wide margin. This may be the reason the Bureau of Land Management is starting to seize gold mines in Oregon. And until they are able to disarm the American people, they know they're not going to be able to confiscate gold from us. They're also going to be talking about the renminbi and the multi-currency system. Can they adapt to it? And the answer is no, they can't. They've really corrupted themselves into a corner here. But the IMF is still out there with their pom-poms and their short little cheerleader skirts saying, you know, it's a solid global economic outlook even as growth diverges, which is a very polite way of the IMF saying that the rich are still getting richer, the poor are still getting poorer, and frankly, that's the way the people who own and run the IMF like it. So the news is good from their point of view, just not for anybody else. Now, a little positive light and a possible inspiration, I would hope. There is a credit card processing business up in Seattle, Gravity Payments. And Dan Price, the CEO, took a major cut in his pay in order to raise his employees' wages. And that is a very cool thing to do. It's making his employees happy. They'll probably be more productive. Now, in countries like Japan, CEOs are paid maybe 2 or 3 times what ordinary workers are. Only in the United States do you have CEOs who are making more money than all their employees put together. The system is hideously out of balance. We're hearing now that Ruby Tuesday's chain is going to close 30 restaurants because of their last quarter losses. People just don't have money to go out and eat anymore. They've already closed the one here at the Ala Moana Shopping Center in Honolulu. And down in Louisiana, the passage of House Bill 195 has banned the use of cash in all transactions involving second-hand goods, meaning garage sales, flea markets, the Goodwill stores will only be allowed to accept payments that are in some form of trackable transaction. This is basically going to end garage sales and flea markets and drive us all back to the shopping malls for new products. But it's just another way of trying to keep track of what people are buying. The official story is, oh, well, you know, thieves deal in cash. When they steal your stuff and sell it at the flea market, you know, for cash, it's aiding and abetting, and we've got to keep all your money in the bank. They're trying to find some way to outlaw cash in order to drive what is in our pockets back into those banks' computers where they can play games with it. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And as you are all probably aware, tomorrow is the real April Fool's Day. Apparently, Chris Christie got caught with undeclared income. It's a new scandal designed to keep him from running next year, as if he didn't already have enough of those. But the really big story is not getting a lot of coverage. Next week, House Republicans are voting on a bill to end the federal inheritance tax. Now, at a time when everybody who is in the 99% are struggling, and the money junkies are doing very, very well, they're going to give them another present. It's basically $269 billion in tax revenues will be just written off by ending the federal inheritance tax. And so for the heirs and heiresses of America's millionaires and billionaires, no taxes on their inheritance at the federal level. And I'm sure members of Congress can expect very hefty campaign contributions next year during the election cycle. Now, there is a reason throughout history why there have been taxes on the wealthy, to rebalance the economy. In ancient cultures, when somebody with a lot of wealth died, it would be redistributed to prevent it concentrating in the hands of too few individuals, who, as history has always shown, when too much wealth is in one person's hands, inevitably they do bad things with it. The economy is completely out of balance. We can see that every single day. And unfortunately, our government has gone over to the side of the money junkies because they're money junkies themselves. That's why we're living in a fascist nation. All right, we're going to grab a phone call here. Cameron in United Kingdom. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Good afternoon to you. Michael, you've mentioned something about banning the transactions on second-hand goods with cash. In UK, we have a law that says that if any outlet refuses to accept legal tender, which is sterling pound, it's actually a criminal offense. I'm sure you have something like that.
Yes, we do. We do. There is a law saying you cannot refuse payment in cash, but we're seeing a lot of institutions are now basically ignoring that law. It's not being enforced. We're seeing institutions saying, above a certain level, it's got to be a paper bank transaction. And the real goal here, I think, in addition to complete government surveillance over how we're spending what little of our money remains here, it's to get cash out of people's pockets and back in the bank's computer systems. Because when money is in your pocket, the bankers can't count it against their cash reserves requirement. But if they get us on those little cards, then you make a purchase on the card. The money goes from this bank's computers directly to this other bank's computers, and overall it gives the banks more liquidity with which to play their little games. And in order to try and perpetuate this system a little longer, and in the long run it's not going to change the final outcome. But they're willing to basically deny people the right to have wealth in their pockets, disposable wealth. And they're trying to justify it by saying, well, cash is something criminals use, and cash is something terrorists use, and there are germs and infections all over the money, which is not entirely accurate because the formula for the paper, for the Federal Reserve note, includes a bacteriostatic agent to absolutely prevent that from happening. Besides which, let's be honest, germs couldn't live on the money I make. So you're all safe. You're all safe there. But, it's all about, this encroaching control over all aspect of our lives, that we're not going to have cash, everything's on plastic, coupled with a government that is now trying to stimulate the economy by ordering us to buy things we don't want and don't need, like mandatory vaccinations.
I think the way out of this is bartering, actually. People should start bartering. And the other thing is, Michael, doesn't it have to go through some kind of Supreme Court or some kind of legislative process for them to just come out and say, well, no, we can't accept cash, thank you very much. You can't, well, not that we can't accept cash, but you can't deal with cash on second-hand goods anyway. Well,
somebody would have to go to the Supreme Court with a legal basis for challenging the law. Certainly it's a violation of the legal tender law. Certainly I think it could be said that it's a violation to our right to privacy. And it's a violation even of our First Amendment rights because political spending is supposed to be an expression of free speech. And this is an infringement because people are going to be discouraged from supporting certain unpopular causes and candidates by the fact that the government's going to know what they're doing. So there are some grounds to challenge the law, but it's not a solid case. But somebody needs to look at it. But we're seeing acts of utter desperation by the government and Wall Street right now, trying to keep this system going a little bit longer, or at least until after they can get World War III going for real, at which point they'll have a scapegoat for all the hardship that we're going to be going through.
Michael, thanks ever so much again.
All right.
Have a great afternoon.
Thank you very much. We're going to switch to Darren in Oregon. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, how you doing, Mike? Just to make a comment, I didn't even hear about that inheritance tax until you just did something about it. A benefit for somebody like me, I'm not, I don't have a high income, and my parents didn't necessarily make a lot of money, but they have somewhat of an estate, probably, $500,000 estate, so.
Well, you're below the current threshold because the federal inheritance tax kicks in at about $5 million.
Okay.
So, yeah, you were never liable for that anyway. This is clearly a gift to the 1% of 1% of Americans, with the implicit understanding that they'll be very generous campaign supporters of the Republicans next year.
Okay.
But the thing is, this is going to cause a $269 billion shortfall in federal tax revenues. Guess who's going to be expected to make that up through carbon taxes or whatever else that they're going to ask us to pay?
Yeah, the minions, that's for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So I haven't heard anything about you moving here. Are you still looking at trying to move back here to the mainland? Or?
Yeah, we are, but, you know, we're, to put it politely, financially constrained. And, you know, I'm going back into the film and TV and visual effects field and try and restart my business there so that we can come up with the money to pay off all of these bills that have piled up on us and finance a move to someplace off of the world's natural invasion routes. Yeah,
that'd be great.
We're certainly motivated to leave Hawaii. I mean, you've seen One String Bikini, you've seen them all, and of course, looking out that window over there, there's a first strike nuclear target for Russia or China, just, you know, a couple of miles down the hill there.
Yeah, my only suggestion is get yourself to a county that has a constitutional sheriff in it.
Absolutely, I would want to do that, but you know, again, it's an issue of finances. We'd like to leave, but you know, moving anywhere from Hawaii, you know, with our equipment, our production equipment, Claire's music system and everything, we're looking, you know, it's a lot of money. There's a lot of zeros in there. And we have seen many times in our neighborhood, people who are having to give up on Hawaii and leave for the mainland. They've got enough money for their air tickets and they have to leave everything else behind. That is not a practical solution for us, because of our various business interests in Claire's music. We have to take all of her music system. It's got a big old harp, and you know, that really does add up. And it all goes through Matson Shipping, and their rates have gone up. They're basically gouging everybody who's trying to leave the island. So yeah, it's, you know, I need to come up with a big lump of cash all at once for us to get off this rock. But we are looking to do that sometime this year, if possible. Okay.
All right, good deal.
All right, so any of you who get a big inheritance and you're not paying that federal inheritance tax, you can send a little bit our way to help us out and keep us going on our work here, because we're not paid $1 million salaries by corporate media to lie to people, because I'm a lousy liar. Let's be honest about that. Okay, so thank you very much for the phone call, Darren. We're going to let you go. And again, this ending of the federal inheritance tax, it is a gift to the richest people of this country who don't really need it, at the expense of the rest of us who are, as usual, expected to pay for all in the end. All right, we're going to take a break for the news, top of the hour. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. Trevor is in our control room ready to answer the calls. And Steve, I'm sorry I missed your call. I was about to take it when you hung up. Feel free to call back in and talk about gold. Now then, we know that fracking has been promoted as the solution to energy independence for years. We know that there are serious issues with fracking, and how fracking has destroyed 2 of California's much-needed freshwater aquifers. We also know that Exxon and Chevron were making very generous donations to the Clinton Foundation at the same time Hillary Clinton, while Secretary of State, was promoting fracking to Europe. We've also been commenting that in recent months, the estimates of how much oil and gas they're going to get from the fracking wells is being edged downward. The Monterey Shale Formation out in California has already been written down by about 90%. They're only going to get 1/10 of the oil and gas they thought they were going to get out of these fracking wells. Across the United States of America, it's already down 1/3. The estimates. They're not producing the energy independence they thought they were, for all the money spent and all the environmental damage that's being done here. Now, the latest report from the U.S. Energy Information Administration is saying that shale oil production has peaked and is about to go into a decline. They've sucked out all they can get. One of the biggest boondoggles, the most environmentally destructive, socially disruptive. And I think we're at a point right now where wise leadership would be saying, yes, we're at the end of the oil age. Doesn't matter how much is down there in the deep crust, because if it costs a barrel's worth of oil to get a barrel of oil to the surface, the party's over. There's no way to make it pencil out. And we should be looking at new technologies. But we keep finding that efforts to develop these new technologies are usually funded in the expectation that they will fail miserably and spectacularly. So the oil companies can go to the news and say, well, it was a nice try, but really we need to keep on pumping oil and invading other oil countries and managing America's energy future. We don't really have a solid national commitment to alternative energy. It's all for show. Oh, the solar cells collapse. See? Bad idea. Oh, the windmills are falling apart. Bad idea. Got to stay with the oil. We need to look at thorium cycle reactors. We need to look at hot fusion. We need to look at cold fusion. Instead of wasting all this money propping up Wall Street and fighting these wars of conquest. Our nation has been bankrupted trying to preserve the old order of things rather than accept that we're at a threshold in the 21st century and it's time to redesign our technological energy base. Bunch of old fossils in Washington, D.C. Let's see, shrinkflation. And this is an article, and I'm sure you've already noticed this, how companies are making products a little bit smaller, a little fewer in the package. They're not shrinking the price to go along with it. And apparently it was really noticeable this last Easter, where a lot of the traditional favorite Easter candies, people were saying, "My, that's a lot smaller than I remember seeing." And the chocolate company come back and say, well, really, we did that for your health because, you know, this is bad for you, so we're making them smaller and still charging you the same price. Apparently, there is another protest on Wall Street, protesting the 1% for profiting off the misery of workers. And there's another article over at Market Watch, and this is not going to catch anybody by surprise. Air travel is getting more unpleasant. There was even that story on SRN Newsbreak that the airlines are now reducing legroom to dangerous levels. It's increasing air rage. Apparently there's less legroom than the systems used to test whether or not people can actually safely evacuate an aircraft or not. And apparently a study done by a Wichita State professor and the dean of Embry-Riddle's College of Aviation found the percentage of on-time flights has fallen to 76.2%. Lost bags rose 13%. I assume that includes those that are being looted by TSA. Bumped passengers increased by 3%. And, of course, consumer complaints jumped 22%. They're starting to handle air travel like it's a bus station. And it looks like that outside the security gate. Now, here's another story about TSA, the Tourism Suppression Agency, over in Denver. Apparently, there was this gay TSA gate attendant. And he worked out this little scam where apparently if he saw a really cute, hunky male, he would indicate to the person running the scanner that it was a female. So immediately there would be an anomaly in the crotch area that he would get to fondle. And apparently he was turned in by a TSA employee 3 months ago. And TSA is only just now getting to the point of saying, well, maybe this isn't really appropriate behavior. Of course it's not appropriate behavior. I wonder how many sexually transmitted diseases this guy passed with his little fondling. So let's talk about Hillary Clinton now. Oh joy, she is running. I love this little article. It was over in Aletho News. And Hillary's defenders are out there saying that America's biased against her because she's a woman. And the point of this article is, no, it's got nothing to do with being a woman. There is a bias in this country against the Clintons. America's contemporary version of the Borgias. Grasping, vicious, ruthless, two-faced. The only thing they're missing is the Borgias' good taste in art and literature. They are not nice people. It's got nothing to do with her gender or her orientation. They're trying to fan that one out there so they can say, oh, resistance to Hillary is because they're anti-gay and the rest of it. Another story coming out of Middle East Eye. Hillary Clinton, a wolf in wolf's clothing, reminding everybody that Clinton voted in 2002 to support the invasion of Iraq on the bogus claim of nuclear weapons. 2011, she argued for NATO missile strikes against Gaddafi. And, of course, she continues to rail about her good relationship with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. That's 3 strikes and you're out of here. We reposted the video of Hillary about Gaddafi. We came, we saw, he died. She thought that was so funny here. And remember, if the Libyan war was about saving lives, it was a catastrophic failure. There were actually voices inside the U.S. military and the Democratic Congress who were very concerned that Hillary was just absolutely focused on getting the U.S. into a war with Libya. And the reality is, on the ground in Libya, the United States took Libya from being one of the finest nations in Africa, economically successful, literate, cultured, to a failed nation state in just 4 years. And that's exactly what the problem was. Libya was a stable, prosperous country that dared have a state central bank and a value-based currency and dared to sell their oil only for their own currency. And that's the reason they got attacked. All righty, let's see. Hillary, and we've been seeing this all over the news today. Hillary vows to protect Americans from the 1% while she's getting money from the 1%. Her top donors include J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, and Morgan Stanley. While she goes on TV and promises she'll fight for the little Americans. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. I want to do a little flashback here. The subject is Rand Paul, whose hat is now in the ring. Back in 2013, Rand gave a speech to the cadets at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina. And he said, Israel is one friend that never leaves our side, has never wavered. One thing you can know for sure is you will never see an Israeli burning the American flag. Rand, have you ever heard of the USS Liberty? All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Tom in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy, Mike. I just wanted to mention something about Hillary running.
Yes.
Well, it's difficult for me to take it seriously until she says 2 things. She's got to say she's going to balance the budget, and she's got to say she's going to bring peace to the Middle East.
She'll say those. Every candidate says them. You know, Obama said he was going to end the wars back in 2008. You know, he was going to end the war. Yeah, they're going to say whatever they feel they need to say to get your vote, and then after they're elected, they're just going to go off and do what their financial backers want them to do. I'm not even listening to the campaign speeches this year. It doesn't matter what they say. It is all a big steaming pile of USDA choice bovine excrement.
Well, I'll take it serious whenever she mentions those 2 things. I mean, that's mandatory, you know.
I'm not going to take her seriously even if she does say them, because here she is, she's on TV today talking about taking care of the American people who are suffering under this economy. In the meantime, her big donors are the same Wall Street firms that put us in this mess. J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Citigroup.
I agree, and
yeah.
You know, pardon me for interrupting, but I mean, she's been as Secretary of State, she's been flying all around the world on the taxpayers' dime, at our expense, and she's making deals for her own benefit.
That's exactly right. And
you know, so how is she going to represent somebody else? She doesn't care about anybody.
No, she's there to build the Clinton dynasty. And by the way, I want to make a comment here, because they're already saying it's going to be Clinton Bush in next year's election here. The presidency is not a crown that is simply passed back and forth between 2 dynastic families. We're not supposed to have hereditary rulers with George Bush Sr., George Bush Jr., now Jeb Bush is running, versus Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, and they're already polishing Chelsea Clinton for a run in 2024.
Oh, my goodness. I didn't want to hear that.
Well,
I knew
turn the dial on that radio there. Yeah.
I didn't think it would be that soon. I knew it was coming.
Yeah.
Oh, well. All that plastic surgery come in handy, I guess.
Yeah, well, did you notice how Hillary Clinton very obviously got a facelift after she left the Department of State?
Oh, no, I try not to look at her.
Well, it's hard not to if you're monitoring the news for what the daily dose of propaganda. All right, Tom, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Now, we ran an article. This is from Aletho News, and it's reporting on a document called Fear Incorporated. It was put out by the Center for American Progress all the way back in 2011, examining just where all this Islamophobia came from. And they basically found a network of 7 supposedly charitable foundations that spent $42.6 million between 2001 and 2009 to fund anti-Muslim rhetoric as part of the propaganda campaign to start a brand new unholy crusade of all the Christians angry against all the Muslims. Very obviously tied in with the 9/11 false flag. Oh, and by the way, they're trying to bring back that whole nonsense about Saudi Arabia did 9/11. Well, at the rate they're going, everybody did 9/11, because first it was Afghanistan, then it was Iraq. Now they're trying to blame Saudi Arabia. And it's absolute, complete, and total nonsense. If you're trying to determine if you're being lied to, look for what should be there and isn't. And what isn't there is a motive for Saudi Arabia to pull off 9/11. Because Saudi Arabia has made immense wealth off the petrodollar deal. They don't want that to go away. They've invested much of that wealth in the United States. They don't want that seized and frozen. And if by some chance Saudi Arabia wanted to harm the United States of America, they don't need to crash airplanes into skyscrapers to do it. All they got to do is ask for their money back. And it would absolutely bring down the U.S. financial system. Rollover in real life. And it would be perfectly legal and acceptable and moral for Saudi Arabia to do that. This is just another pathetic attempt to distract from the fact that when those World Trade Towers came down, a bunch of Mossad agents were arrested for cheering and clapping while it was happening. It's to distract you from the fact that Odaigo, an Israeli-owned company with offices in New York, received a warning of the coming attack before the airplanes in the attack had even left the ground. It's to distract you from the fact that in Carl Cameron's 4-part series on the Israeli spy ring, the largest foreign spy ring ever uncovered in this country, a U.S. official admitted there was evidence linking those arrested Mossad agents to 9/11, but that evidence was classified by the U.S. government. Oh no, it was Saudi Arabia did that, and they're still out there trying to push this whole idea. Saudi Arabia doesn't have a reason to do 9/11. If they wanted to harm us, all they got to do is call in their loans, their investments. All righty. They're apparently down in South Carolina. There's now a public outcry calling for the arrest of the second officer who was involved in the shooting of Walter Scott for not stopping the first officer and apparently being complicit in the attempted botched cover-up. Fox News is out there saying that the problem is minority communities need to be trained to be more sensitive to the police. It's the fault of all these black people getting shot. They just don't understand how hard it is to be a police officer. Boy, oh boy, just when you think Fox cannot be a bigger whore, they surprise you. It's just amazing here. Got another story here from Vineland, New Jersey. New Jersey man died after police allowed a police dog to attack him after he was already pinned down on the ground. They put him on the ground, they beat him up, then they sicked the dog on him, and the man died. And it just gets worse and worse. Guy named Eric Harris. This was caught on video. Remember that BART station incident? Cop thought he was grabbing his taser, pulled his gun instead. Same thing happened to this Eric Harris. And the video catches the officer saying, I shot him, I'm sorry. But they're still out there trying to say it was this guy's fault. Down in Florida, the police are now using military armed personnel carriers to pull people over for traffic stops. It's just absurd. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Hello, hi America. Welcome back to the show. Now, yesterday we were talking about this growing dispute between the Bureau of Land Management, again, and the holders of mining claims in southwestern Oregon. And it's one of the richest gold fields in the United States. The Bureau of Land Management has just come on in and said the gold miners need to get out. If they don't clear out, the BLM is going to burn down all their buildings and equipment. These people have had these mining claims in their families since the 1860s. Now, the Bureau of Land Management does not have a court order. They're doing this supposedly on their own authority to go on in and say, you have to get off this land, we are taking over management. In all probability, this is the beginning of a trend to confiscate the gold mines inside the United States of America, to prop up the fact that the New York Federal Reserve has been playing fast and loose with other people's gold bullion, and they're running out. Remember, we talked, they're apparently having a meeting on Friday on what they're going to do. And they certainly are not in a position to confiscate gold from the American people. We're not going to voluntarily surrender it, because we saw what happened in 1933 when the last time when Roosevelt confiscated the gold. It helped the bankers, did not help the people. Once they succeed in confiscating all the guns, then they'll come for the gold. So this mining thing is a stopgap operation. Now, the reason I'm bringing this story back today is we are hearing about all these so-called militias and patriot groups who are ready to leap to the fore to defend the Oregon gold miners the way they did the Bundy Ranch. And I would like to basically introduce a note of caution, because we know the Bureau of Land Management is in the wrong legally and constitutionally. They're in violation of the Enclave Clause. We know the Bureau of Land Management has been bullying their way all across America, taking land that does not belong to them. But we also know the government is looking for any excuse to outlaw citizens' militias, even though they're guaranteed the right to keep and bear arms, to outlaw or demonize the patriot groups, or to have any excuse to say, see, now we have to take the guns away from the American people. And there will be agent provocateurs there. They were at the Bundy Ranch trying to kick up a fuss. So, yes, stand firm against the Bureau of Land Management. Do not initiate any violence. Just be prepared to respond if the Bureau of Land Management initiates violence against you. But we know the U.S. government is looking for any reason to disarm the American people, declare a national emergency, and shred what remains of the Bill of Rights. Sheriff Richard Mack is out there talking about how they can stop Jade Helm. And what he means by that is to stop it in case it goes live and it stops being practice and a drill with hired actors playing people being seized and relocated forcibly. And again, this could be another effort by the U.S. government to provoke some kind of a public uprising, which they can then seize on as an excuse to order gun seizures and the suspension of our civil rights, to complete the path from democratic republic to full-on fascist dictatorship. Now, here's a very tragic story. It involves a gentleman who is the father of this young girl who, with her boyfriend, were killed last month when the car they were in lost control on a curve and flipped over the edge of a bridge, and they drowned. Shades of Chappaquiddick. Now, there are barricades along the length of the bridge, but none at the entrance where the curve is, where you're most likely to see an accident. So the father of the girl who died, Shannon Hamilton, went to the county to try and get some additional barricades built on that curve to prevent another drowning. And the county's attitude is, well, we don't have the money to do it. It's not our problem. So Shannon Hamilton took up a collection of building supplies from friends and neighbors And he went out there to build his own barricade, his own safety feature along that curve leading to the bridge where those kids died. And the county arrested him. Because if anybody is going to do something good, it's going to be the government. You people aren't allowed to do good things. This is along the same mindset as all those cities and counties who've now passed laws to make it a crime to feed the homeless people. Those homeless want to eat, they should go to the supermarkets like the rest of us. Alrighty, Japanese court is blocking the restarting of 2 nuclear reactors. It's bad news over there in Japan. As you know, they sent in this very exotic robot to just look around to see if possibly robots could be used to dismantle and remove the melted cores of those reactors. It got a total of 10 meters in before failing. The video that it sent back indicates intense gamma ray bombardment. Made the pictures very difficult to see. The radiation at Fukushima inside those containment vessels is basically strong enough to kill a human being in an hour or less. Now, as you know, Nestle's California water permit expired 27 years ago. State of California didn't have a problem with it, but it's become a huge stink as California deals with a serious water shortage caused by a combination of fracking-contaminated aquifers and decayed water management systems. The U.S. Forest Service is cracking down on Nestle, saying that they're probably going to renew the permit, but with some restrictions. The federal government now is getting into the act and saying, yes, we absolutely will look into this situation. Actually, the time to look into the situation was 27 years ago. Our government is acting like a firefighter. After the fire is on, they're going to go and put it out and act like they're heroes. The government's job is to prevent the fire from starting in the first place, to prevent the expiration of the water permit, to prevent the Deepwater Horizon explosion, to prevent the leakage at Hanford and WIPP. Not to stand around until the American people start saying, hey, we've got a problem here, and then rush in to say, yes, we will do our job now. Nicaragua has quarantined a U.S. Embassy employee, staff member, over concerns he has Ebola. They're demanding the U.S. send a special plane to evacuate him. So Ebola may now be here in Central America, as we predicted it inevitably would be. Washington State School District removes 143 students over the vaccine law. Have you noticed how much money they're spending to see if students have bought and paid for all the things they're supposed to pay for, and almost no research whatsoever into whether Ted Cruz is actually legitimately qualified to be President of the United States? And the part they're not telling you about this vaccine story is most of the people coming down with the measles have had the measles vaccination. At the very least, the vaccine is not working. At worst, the vaccine is causing the epidemics, and the CDC now admits recently vaccinated people can and do give measles to other people around them. This is what's causing the epidemics, which are then fanned up in the media to get you to buy more of these products. The U.S. vaccine court says over 100 people have died from the measles vaccine. None have died from measles itself in 10 years. This is all about trying to stimulate the economy by forcing you to buy products you don't want and don't need. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the last segment of our program today here. The Customs Border Enforcement, who are already in trouble for allowing criminals with, including known murderers, loose in our general population, are predicting that there's going to be another border surge of illegals coming across the border with Mexico. 39,000 child migrants, 35,000 complete family units expected this next surge. Borders wide open. We know these are people who are not only, in some cases, convicted criminals, evading punishment. We know they are carrying communicable diseases, scabies, HIV, H1N1, the plague in one case, and measles. Now, here's a very interesting story. Apparently, authorities in Mexico are now claiming that ISIS has training bases in Mexico only miles from the Texas border. This is your daily dose of booga booga. ISIS is coming to get you. They've been selling you that propaganda for a long time. Because if there was a real threat just south of the border, wouldn't the U.S. government close those border crossings instead of letting just anyone walk through? Wouldn't they drone strike those camps in Mexico, as they've been doing in all those other countries? This is just another attempt to make you so afraid of ISIS that you will stop thinking and do as you're told. All right, almost to the end of the show. It's time for human-caused global warming. Let's see, over at Petoskey News, winter is over, but snow still possible. Possible snowfall till the end of the month. This is in Gaylord, Michigan. Vermont is cheering. They lead the nation in snow, and the ski resorts are staying open later in the season. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. And it's not just New England, contrary to what all the people pushing the blob story out in the Pacific are all about. Mexico got 8 inches of snow. Spring snow. Maybe that's why they're all heading for the border. Let's see. Spring snow ahead for the Rockies, including Denver. Weather moves from fire danger to snow this week. Up in Washington State, the snowpack gained back 2% from this last weekend storm. And now, as it becomes very obvious they're not going to be able to get any more traction about human-caused global warming, the carbon Nazis are changing their agenda. They're not going to be talking about climate or weather or any of that stuff anymore. The new plan to tax carbon has to do with ocean acidification. The carbon is getting into the world's oceans. It's making carbonic acid, and that's destroying the food chain. Actually, carbon dioxide in ocean water does exactly the same thing that carbon dioxide in the air does. It stimulates plant life on which the chain of food is based. Yesterday we were talking about how it has become illegal in many states to collect the rainwater that falls on your own property. Somebody actually got sent to jail for that in one state. Maryland, according to an email I got, Maryland has a different idea. They tax property owners for the estimated worth of the water falling on their property from the sky. Those are the king's raindrops, you knave. You're not allowed to touch those. Amazing, amazing stuff. First case of lethal bird flu in commercial chicken in the U.S. has been found. All right, I'm going to go back here a little bit and touch a little bit more about the vaccinations. The Obama administration plotting adult vaccination mandates. They're trying to stimulate the economy by making us buy shots that we don't want, probably don't need. If you're my age, you've had the measles. You don't need a measles vaccine. But we're going to have a new program to track all Americans' vaccination records. Can't track these convicted murderers coming across the border from Mexico, but by golly, they're going to make sure that you are buying what you are told to buy. World Health Organization is out there saying, well, the scare tactics really aren't working, so now it's time to sell vaccinations like Coca-Cola with glitzy ads and celebrity spokespeople. Get your jab today here. By the way, at the end of World War II, Nuremberg trials came up with what was called the Nuremberg Code, supposed to be a global model for national behavior after that, based on the crimes Nazi Germany was accused of committing. And there is a Nuremberg Code regarding medical treatment of people. The voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential. Mandating vaccinations is a violation of the Nuremberg Code, to which the U.S., along with every other nation on earth, is supposed to be compliant. They're not allowed to conduct medical experiments on you without your permission, which is what these vaccines are. They're not conducting trials to find out anything that's wrong with them. That's why so many of these problems show up after they're put into general usage. Now, we put up a link to a website, sb277.org. There's organization of opposition to Bill 277, which will make vaccinations mandatory in California. You are not allowed to refuse. Sig Heil, Sig Heil, Sig Heil. And they're planning some protests and organizations, but ultimately I have to be in agreement with them. It is up to the individual what medications they will take or not take. It's not the it's not the government's place to tell you you will buy this medication and you will take it. That's not an authority the Constitution gives the government. The 10th Amendment prohibits them from saying that. And they can't claim that it's all for the general welfare because so many of these mandated vaccines have turned out to be disasters. The 1976 swine flu vaccination killed 50 times as many people as the flu itself did. The current measles vaccine has killed over 100 people. Measles is not a lethal disease. The 2009 swine flu vaccine turned out to be no more effective than over-the-counter acetaminophen. It's all about money. It's all about forcing you to buy things you don't want and don't need to keep the economy going. We've been hearing Wall Street crying for weeks about how what's wrong with the economy is the American people aren't spending enough. We don't have it to spend. Please download a clue. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. All righty. Let's see. Final story for the show today. And it's another in a long line of these stories about, we're sort of getting up close to the idea that there's life on Mars. We're not there yet, but we're just trying to slowly get you comfortable with it. Yesterday we were reporting on the discovery that there are, in fact, subsurface water ice glaciers that over time are seen to basically flow downhill like glaciers do on Earth. Now we're getting an announcement that NASA's Curiosity has confirmed liquid water just below the surface. I remember when I found this photo from one of the earlier rovers that seemed to show a little tiny puddle of water on the surface, and I posted it. And I said, that sure looks like water or water ice to me. Oh, no, that's a dust artifact. That couldn't possibly be water. Wrong again. Mars has liquid water just below the surface dust. They're still trying to hem and haw and get up to the point of finally admitting there's life on Mars. They've already identified mat structures typical of microbial activity here on Earth. Those little blueberries that they like to call them, the only analogous form on Earth are hard-shelled bacterial colonies. And when they finally admit there's life on Mars, remember the name Dr. Gilbert Levin. He found it first. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here and get some animation work done, pay a few bills. We will be back tomorrow here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, make good choices, and aloha, America.